Hello everybody, we got something lighthearted here today from Memory Trails. Please give him a sub. This is 20 legendary console and arcade games that we couldn't put down. Let's see what they've come up with.
The late 70s and the 80s were the golden age of video games. We burned through rolls of quarters with friends, crowding around glowing screens and losing track of time. If we ever got all that change back, there's a good chance it might have been enough for a brand new Cadillac.
I'm feeling the nostalgia already just with the first simple images. And going to think about it, you know, like back in Australia, at first it was a 20-cent piece, at least from my age group remembering to play an arcade game. Then it was two of them, 40 cents a little bit later on, going into the mid and later 80s. It doesn't seem that much, but when you account for inflation now, 30, 35 years ago, yeah, I mean, it's not really a different price to what games would be today. I mean, $1, $2 if you're playing just a regular arcade game a turn. And here's the thing, like, I don't know how the economy was as such. I mean, I was not a privileged kid, but not an underprivileged kid. I was kind of like smack bang in the middle. But I don't know how I was constantly able to get access to 20-cent pieces to play these games. Because if you look at today, there's no way I'm going to be forking $1 coins, $2 coins constantly into an arcade machine. It just feels like such a waste. But back then, it just was a wonderful feeling and it felt so worth it. Hey, different times, I guess.
From Pac-Man, Tron, and Tempest to so many others, these were the games we grew up on. Today, we're remembering 20 games we just couldn't pull ourselves away from.
Alright, what you got there, Memory Trails?
When Pac-Man hit arcades in 1980, it wasn't just another game. It was a full-blown craze. We had the lunchboxes, the t-shirts, the stickers, even the Saturday morning cartoon, and that sound.
Yeah, man, waka 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 waka. That is probably one of the most iconic sounds in video game history. If not, it's definitely in the top 10. Everyone always still goes around going waka 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 waka. Probably people that don't even play Pac-Man. But here's the fascinating thing about Pac-Man, even in 2025, maybe not as much as in the 80s, but it's still a big merchandise machine. Within the last decade at one point, for example, I actually did have a Pac-Man keychain, and there's so many copycat Pac-Man games out there as well, and various things that are still making this whole experience relevant. Sure, it might not be as big as like what Mario still is today, but you certainly can't argue about how iconic Pac-Man still is. And it's like, what, 45 years later? Pretty impressive.
In our heads, we'd spend hours dodging ghosts and chasing that last blinking dot. Then came Ms. Pac-Man with her bow and new mazes, and the obsession started all over again. Let's be honest,
some
of us liked her version even more. Asteroids didn't need fancy graphics, just glowing outlines, quick reflexes, and nerves of steel.
I never really got into the whole Asteroids craze, but I owned Vectrex. And a Vectrex was a home console that came with its own monitor with vector graphics, and they did a lot of really good arcade copycats. Like, for example, instead of Pac-Man, you had Minesweep. Instead of Donkey Kong, you had Spike. And instead of Asteroids, you had Mindstorm. I'm not going to digress too much, guys. But the point is, I did have a lot of an Asteroids-type experience growing up. It's just so wonderful controlling that spaceship, zapping it around the screen, moving in a 360 direction. It was wonderful. I might have to actually get this Atari Reloaded version. I wonder what it's like. Let me know if you played it.
Open space, dodging rocks and blasting anything that moved. A lot of us figured out you could survive longer by slowly spinning in place and firing non-stop. Not the most exciting tactic, but it worked. The game was such a hit that Atari started converting older cabinets just to meet demand. This is where it all started. The very first time we met Mario. Though back then he was just Jumpman.
That's right.
Donkey Kong was tough, and those rolling barrels didn't cut anyone any slack. In every arcade, there always seemed to be a small crowd gathered around the machine.
I know by today's standards, Donkey Kong, the original, is a little bit dated because it is just a single screen platforming game after all. But I still play it from time to time every week or every other week just to kill 5 minutes. And let me tell you, I think the controls, even in 2025 in the original Donkey Kong, whether you're playing the arcade version or the NES port, are still really tight. I mean, if you haven't played Donkey Kong before, or you're thinking of going back to it, have a try and see what I mean. It's still a really fun gameplay loop.
Cheering or waiting their turn. We dropped quarter after quarter trying to rescue that pixelated girl at the top. Some of us spent whole afternoons and weeks of allowance chasing that high score.
I was a little bit young.
Game, it was a challenge, and we
Couple
were
years.
hooked. Missile Command threw you right into chaos. Missiles raining down, cities exploding, and no time to think. The arcade version had that smooth trackball, letting you zip across the screen
that
like
would
a pro,
be easier.
But on the Atari at home,
Yeah, see, I used to play this on the Atari 2600. My friends had this, so I'd go to their place to play. It's deceptively difficult, this game. Basically, you have to take a rectile and you have to move it towards these dropping missiles, I guess you could say, stop them from hitting the Earth. And the amount of hand-eye coordination need to get the rectile perfect to blow up all these missiles, I always found this incredibly difficult, and it's a shame because I would like to play this one more often. Unfortunately, for some of us, there's just a very small ceiling.
joystick felt like moving through glue. Your bases would go up in smoke before you could even react.
Yeah.
Still, there was something about it. The pressure, the sound, the flashing lights that kept us hitting start again.
I still remember playing with my neighbors, man.
Galaga was one of those games that grabbed you from the first wave and didn't let go. The enemy patterns, the dive-bombing ships, the sound of that double blaster kicking in, it was arcade magic.
Yeah, nothing will beat the sounds of Galaga, and I have memories of playing Galaxy in the game before this at the laundromat, and then Galaga, the burger place, had a cocktail machine down the road from my grandmother's, so you could sit in one of those really cool, old-school looking plastic stools and actually sit down, and, you know, depending on whose turn it was, the screen would flip, and that would be absolutely awesome. As iconic as the sounds are from an arcade point of view, I feel like the most fun way to play Galaga was on the NES. It was a little bit more of a forgiving port. It allowed you a little bit more easily, I guess, to get like 10, 20, 30 levels in. And yeah, I mean, this game is fantastic. I mean, it's just about fighting different waves of enemies that get progressively harder. Every few levels, there's a bonus level that gives you a little bit of a break to catch your breath, the opportunity to get more lives. You know, very early space shooter, 1980, 1981, still holds up. I would recommend the NES version,
and if your ship
though.
got captured,
It was on War
rescuing
Games
it to
too,
fight
wasn't it?
with two was the ultimate power move. We didn't just play Galaga. We waited in line at the arcade to get our turn. Fast, clean, addictive, and easily one of the greatest from that golden era.
This held up in the arcade
Position
for
was
longer
the
than
game
others.
That made us feel like we were really behind
Oh,
the
yeah.
wheel. A steering wheel, a gear shifter, and that one unforgettable line.
Prepare to qualify.
Even now, that distorted voice is burned into
Prepare
our
to
brains.
qualify.
It wasn't just about speed. You had to actually learn the track, time your turns, and avoid crashing out.
I think the first time I ever saw pole position was at a bowling alley in Sydney, and I think it was a stand-up cabinet, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of these arcade games had sit-down and stand-up cabinets. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys have gone back to play pole position recently. There's plenty of Namco collections where you can get a hold of it. As far as beat the clock racing games go, it's a little bit tricky to get used to the twitchy controls at times, but once you master it with a few games, it's as fun as Beat the Clock Racer as any other 80s Beat the Clock Racer, and that one came out in 1982. It was like one of the granddaddies of it all. And yeah, I still love pole position. It's a wonderful
A
game.
lot of us, this was the first racing game that felt fast, smooth, and way ahead of its time. Tempest looked like it came from the future. That spinning tunnel,
The
those
vector
flashing
graphics,
vector
man.
lines, and the stars drifting behind it.
The thing with vector graphics is it's basically, what is it, geometry, right? It's just different shapes put together to give you like the illusion of 3D and these cutting edge space age like 3D experiences and graphics. But really it was like the primitive form of putting games together, ironically. Like sprites came along after this, right? But oh, dude, it's incredible. Like games like this and Star Wars and all that in the arcade, you would play them, especially with the dark and dimly lit rooms and everything, and you really would think you'd be in a space age experience. And yeah, I mean, I never played Tempest a lot, but I used to play Star Wars, same graphic
moving
style.
around the edge, blasting strange shapes that crawled toward us. The action was fast, the screen was always alive, and each level felt more intense than the last. For 1981, it was unlike anything else in the arcade, and most of us just couldn't walk past it. Qbert was simple in theory, jump on cubes and change their color, but that diagonal joystick, it confused a lot of us as kids.
Exactly, it confused a lot of us as kids, including me. It didn't matter if I played this in the arcade or the Atari 2600. just something about trying to go the right way in an isometric design. Like I would press the go left and I'd all of a sudden go down, or I'd press the go right and I'd go sort of like down right. I'm just giving you an example. I just never knew which way was up or down in this game, and it'd be a miracle if I could even beat a level. So I respect how popular this game was. I mean, people still talk about Qbert to this day. I just didn't get it, unfortunately.
We'd
Not for me.
constantly send him flying off the edge by accident. Still, we loved it. The sound effects were
You did.
unforgettable. The enemies were odd in the best way. And that little cartoon bubble full of random symbols when he got hit, that was the arcade version of swearing. And it cracked us up every single time.
That's pretty cool.
Tron was a big deal when it hit arcades. The cabinet glowed with bright neon, and the gameplay pulled us right into the world of the movie.
Well, one good thing about Tron is one of the first like hybrid games that I remember. So you had like the bike challenge. There was this level I think where you had to defeat spiders and then infiltrate a base. And the point is there was all sorts of these different things that you had to do. And so it wasn't common to have a hybrid experience at that time. Don't think it holds up as well as some other games now, but one thing I do remember about the Tron cabinet, it's one of the most sexiest cabinets you would ever see. There was that beautiful blue space age one that you would sometimes see floating around. And I mean, marketing is everything. It's a great way to entice people to throw in a few bucks, right?
You had light cycles, tanks, and grid battles.
Yeah, there
all
you go.
packed
There's
into
the
one
grid.
machine.
That one. I remember
it
that
looked
one.
great and felt different from the usual space shooters. And then came discs of Tron.
Oh, I'm so happy they spoke about this one too, because I probably saw discs of Tron even more often than the original Tron cabinet, and I would always see the big kids play this, and I could barely see what was going on, because it felt like it was always one of those arcade cabinets that was taller than the rest, and I always remember when I was like a 3, 4, 5-year-old, I was never tall enough to actually see what was going on the screen, unlike other machines. And so it was a little bit disappointing for me. But yeah, I remember this one quite well.
Depth, but not as easy to find. If your arcade had both, chances are it had a crowd too. Frogger made something as basic as crossing the street feel like life or death. You had traffic, logs, diving turtles, and just seconds to react. The gameplay was fast, but the rules were simple. Move smart, time it right. And
you know, when it comes to Frogger, I think out of all the retro games from like the 1980, 1981 era, for me at the moment, it's got the most satisfying gaming loop. Again, probably because of the sense of speed and how quick it is to beat levels. So, you know, first you've got to survive dodging cars, then you've got to jump on logs, some of them disappearing, and then you've got to get one frog in each of the, I guess you could say, the home bases up the top, while also avoiding crocodiles. And then you've just got the music, which is just a complete earworm. Once you play Frogger, good luck getting that music out of your head at the end of the day. Anyway, it's fantastic. I absolutely love Frogger.
let's be honest, this game definitely reminded a lot of us to look both ways before crossing a road. For a game about a frog, it stuck with us longer than we expected. Defender was one of the toughest games in any arcade. Fast enemies, quick reflexes, and that scrolling screen that never gave you a break. There was no safe corner, no time to breathe, just pure chaos.
You know, I wish I had the experience of Defender in the arcade, but I did get a hand-me-down Atari 2600 from a friend of my mother's when I was a young boy, and one of the games it came with was Defender. And I have to say that even though by then I was already entitled little brat playing NES games, there was just something addictive about playing the Defender loop, I guess, that would keep me up for many a night. And so you basically have to shoot spaceships, rescue, I guess you could say, people, these little blocks on Earth that the aliens are trying to kidnap, and basically prevent the alien apocalypse. So it's kind of like Independence Day, really. And it was just such a wonderful, satisfying gameplay loop. Atari 2600 version's really good.
But when we played it at home,
Yeah, there you go, there it is.
It felt just a bit easier, mostly thanks to the joystick. Still, no matter where we played it, staying alive more than a minute or two always felt like an achievement.
Yeah, that's true.
Released in the late 70s, Space Invaders kicked off a new era of arcade games. Rows of aliens marching down. That steady pulse of sound speeding up as they got closer. It was pure tension.
You know, my relationship with Space Invaders is a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I do respect how iconic it is, because in 1978, no one really seen anything like it, because until then it was pretty much just pong, 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 maybe Death Race beforehand. But then you got like Space Invaders, which was the first time you actually played a role of like someone defending the human race against an alien onslaught. And it was so awesome back then. I feel like by today's standards, though, the gameplay slow and sluggish. It was already out of the arcades, and we had things like Galaga when I started going. With that being said, I've got like a remake of Space Invaders on Steam. I've forgotten what it's called, but it actually modernizes the concept. And that is a beautiful sensory experience. Not only is the gameplay loop satisfying, but you've got like all the techno sort of like things going on, and it's pretty incredible. So, yeah, look, the original Space Invaders doesn't really do anything for me. Absolutely love it remixed.
And here's a fun fact. The faster movement wasn't intentional. As you cleared more aliens, the game had less to process, so everything sped up. The developer noticed it, liked how it felt, and decided to keep it.
Some of the best ideas are accidental.
The best features happen by accident.
Wow.
Contra was one of the best two-player games of its time. Playing side by side with a friend or your brother was half the fun. Unless you hit the waterfall level, then things got tense real fast. The non-stop action, the weapons, the explosions. It felt like Rambo in 8-bit form. A lot of us imagined we were action heroes, blasting through waves of enemies.
We didn't have the privilege of having Contra in Australia. In Australia, because of like the whole licensing with Konami, they had to slightly change the name of certain games. For example, I think in some regions, Russian Attack was Green Beret. In some areas, Ninja Turtles was Hero Turtles. In Australia, instead of Contra, it was actually Probotector. And when I was in high school, I did borrow this off a friend in school on NES, but it was a Probotector version. And it was kind of cool, but you kind of had this big cyborg robot, and as sweet as what it was, I didn't have the feeling that you guys did in America did of having like an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Sylvester Stallone type character, you know what I mean? So I didn't really start connecting with this game until I actually became a streamer a few years ago. But better late than never. In my 40s, I love playing this game now. Hopefully I can beat it without using the 30 live cheat one day.
And if you knew the famous code for 30 lives, you were a legend
Mind
on
reader.
the block. When Super Mario Bros. Hit the NES, it felt like a whole new world opened up. The scrolling levels, secret blocks, fire flowers, everything about it was bigger, brighter, and better than what we'd seen before. We ran, jumped, and slid down flagpoles like it was second nature.
Yeah, so just to set the scenario, my first console ever was a Vectrex. I guess you could say in the early 80s. My dad gave it to me in a very young age, the Vector graphics, but it was just an arcadey system, really. It wasn't anything cutting edge. And after that, I was going to the arcades every now and then. Maybe I would play on a Sega that a friend I knew had or something. But actually, that was afterwards. So I didn't do the Sega till after Nintendo, excuse me. I'm just reminiscing here. But when I was 7 years old was when I first played a Nintendo. I went to visit my grandmother on Mother's Day, actually. And my auntie, who was close to my age, she said, "Oh, she's not here today. She's off with her boyfriend, but she has this new Nintendo. Would you like to try it?" And that was my experience, May of 1988, playing Super Mario Brothers for the first time. And I was such a horrible grandson because I was supposed to be there to visit my grandmother, and I was just mesmerized by this new experience that I'd never ever had before on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And you all know Mario Brothers, I don't need to go further than that. I will say this though, at the end of the day, I got up to World 2-1 for the first time, which is not much of an achievement by today's standards, but back when I was 7, I thought I was king shit, and I told everyone at school the next day. And finally, a year and a half later, I got my own NES. That was just a big part of my gaming history and a big start of things to come. So
For
yeah,
many of us, this wasn't just
wonderful.
A game. It was a reason to race home after school. It brought video games back into our living rooms and started a legacy that's still going strong. The Oregon Trail actually started way back in 1971 as a classroom project on a teletype machine.
Old.
But most of us remember the 1985 version,
Sure.
the one with the blocky graphics, wagon wheels, and constant danger of dysentery. It showed up on Apple II
dysentery.
computers in schools across America, and suddenly, learning about history wasn't so boring. We didn't always make it to Oregon, but we sure remember trying and losing half the party along the way.
They've got a really awesome remake now by Gameloft, which you can get on Switch, PlayStation, Steam, everything like that. I play it every Thanksgiving. It's just kind of a tradition to do something very American on Thanksgiving. I usually do that. And remake's worth a look. Makes it a bit more sophisticated. Characters have got a bit more of a backstory, so you got a little bit more of a reason to connect. There's still dysentery, and it's still just as hard to escape. So definitely check it out. Also, I would recommend Organ Trail if you want an old school zombie version remix. Yeah, I mean, I put it, this point is that even though this came out so long ago, 40 years later, I still love the gameplay loop. There's just something so incredibly addictive about it.
Centipede had a rhythm to it, fast movement, bright colors, and that satisfying snap of the trackball. You'd shoot your way through mushrooms, spiders, and of course,
Looks like
the
Greg Brady's
centipede
bedroom.
crawling down the screen. What a lot of people don't know is that this was one of the first arcade hits co-designed by a woman, programmer Donna Bailey, and it showed up in arcades everywhere. Simple, quick, addictive. The kind of game you'd play just one more time, about 10 times in a row.
Sure.
Pong first appeared in bars, bowling alleys, and early arcades, and people lined up to play. 2 paddles, 1 square ball, and that was all it took to grab our attention.
So sometimes it's less is more. And I mean, I've mentioned this on another video. The gameplay loop of Pong is still satisfying even today. Like, they did similar games in the future with Neo Geo, like Windjammers. If you go to any arcade now, like I've said before, they've got like an air hockey table, which is really just a physical form of Pong. I don't know what it is. It's just an activity. It's just like when you're in the street, you're just kicking the ball to one another, trying to score goals. It's just something so nostalgic about that gameplay loop. Obviously, it spawned a whole bunch of Pong consoles, and the rest was history there. Shit.
Was simple.
Doesn't look like
then,
much, but
it
it's
felt
incredible.
Completely new. And when Sears started selling the home version in the mid-70s, it brought that same experience into our living rooms. Pong didn't just start the arcade era, it kicked off everything that came after. This arcade game really made you feel like you were flying an X-Wing.
You know what? This was one of the first arcade games I ever remember playing. And so I was about 2 years old, maybe 3 years old. My dad would take me to the Playtime. That was one of the big arcade chains in Brisbane when I was a kid. I think it was on Albert Street, if I'm not mistaken. And it would be the sit-down cabinet of this. He'd sit me down on this lap, and on his lap, and he would play this game with me. And yeah, that was just, I still love playing this with a mouse on MAME and on my emulator to this day. What a wonderful experience. I'm not one that's a big consumer or anything, but if I was ever to have a few arcade cabinets in my house and like a bachelor pad one day or something like that, this would be one of the machines I would love to have. It's just incredibly timeless for me. Again, it's got that vector graphic style, which gives you the illusion with geometry to make it look more advanced than what it actually is. And digitized speech as well, which at the time was pretty far ahead to have all those Star Wars voice clips and everything. Still amazes me how they were able to fit all those synths in such a small file. But yeah, what a wonderful experience. I'm glad it's on the list.
Fast, and the controller, one of the best ever in an arcade. Some locations even had the sit-down version of the cabinet,
That was
which
mine.
felt like a mini cockpit, if you were willing to pay a little more.
Oh,
Flying through
really?
the Death Star Trench and hearing lines from the movie, it was pure excitement for Star Wars fans, and we couldn't get enough of it. Galaxian was the game that laid the groundwork for Galaga. It took the basic space shooter formula and added bright colors.
One thing that's really good about Galaxian is the sounds. I'm not going to pretend that this basic gameplay loop was as fun as Galaga, but it was kind of like a step up from Space Invaders. Similar gameplay, but more high-tech, I guess you could say, sounds as well as like sprite, I guess visuals you could say. One thing about Galaxian, it was always so loud hearing the psh, 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 psh. And so if you walked into an arcade or a laundromat or anything like that, I always felt like the Galaxian machine was louder than any other cabinet, and it was always be like the first thing you would notice. Let me know if you had that experience and you agree. That was mine.
Smoother animation and enemies that actually dove at you. You could hear it buzzing from the far end of the arcade.
Yeah, right?
That sound
Yes.
always pulled us in. It was challenging, but fair, and it kept us reaching for one more quarter. For many of us, Galaxian was our first real taste of space combat. Rampage was pure mayhem, smashing buildings, eating civilians, and turning entire cities into rubble.
Yeah, you know what? It's so cool to be like a King Kong-style monkey or a Godzilla-type lizard or the Wolfman or whatever and just knocking down buildings, eating people. And it was such a cool gimmick back then. I mean, who doesn't want to eat people and just put their reign of terror on a city, right? But here's the thing. I just felt like the gameplay loop of this game got pretty old pretty fast. So it was fun for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but then it was just the same thing constantly. And to be honest, I would end up getting bored. With that being said, I borrowed this game off my friend on Atari 2600. That version is surprisingly fun to play. You might be surprised. Check that out if you haven't already, but let's go.
You could play as a giant ape, a lizard, or a wolf, and if your friends joined in, the chaos only got better. It was one of the best multiplayer arcade games of its time. There wasn't really a goal, just survive and destroy.
Yeah, see, it's just kind of like mindless killing and bashing.
Few games let us cause this much trouble and still feel like we were winning. If this video brought back some good memories, there's plenty more on the channel about those times we all remember.
Yeah, that was a fantastic video. Guys, once again, please sub to Memory Trails and to us as well. And hey, maybe in the chat, let us know some of your own personal arcade experiences. And thank you for watching another video, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.